Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. My name is Jamira Burley, joined by my amazing co-host, Brea Baker. And today we're diving into one of the oldest traditions in American history, the good old boycott.
Yes. And specifically, we're looking at the ongoing boycott of Target and what it reveals about today's war on DEI, how Black Americans have long used economic resistance as a tool for liberation, how we're still doing that, because let's be clear, this isn't new. What is new is how quickly outrage can spread and be monetized in the age of social media. Whew, so let's get into it. But we got to start with some headlines.
Unfortunately.
Well, first of all, that BBB stupid ugly bill, but have to talk about Senator Lisa Murkowski, a white woman from Alaska, said it was agonizing to vote on this bill right before she clicked yes to strip so many millions of Americans of health care that would have shut down hospitals and nursing homes and all sorts of other things. And ultimately, despite how agonizing she described it to be, she got the concession she wanted for her state, got the kickback she wanted, and was happy to vote yes. In a democracy, it feels like every other week there's some Supreme Court case or some bill going through Congress or some executive order that is threatening to totally upend our lives, and it falls on a handful of people to be able to be the checks and balances for us. And it's always too close of a call.
I mean, and that's why it's one of the most disgusting. I mean, she's annoying. She's forever saying that she is, almost not as conservative as her colleagues, not as extreme, but she always falls in line. And it's one thing if she didn't get anything for her state and she sacrificed, quote unquote, sacrificed like everyone else. But the problem is that no one in Congress is truly sacrificing. Their voters are. There are millions of people that would have been on track to die had this bill been passed. When you remove access to Medicaid, when you remove access to food programs, when you remove access to mental health care, when you remove all of those access that are life-saving access to some of the most needy communities, most vulnerable communities in our society, you are signing their death certificate. And she had to know that was the case, but she was more willing to be able to be a part of the boys club in Congress than she wasn't actually protecting the American citizens, which she is supposed to do. It's not just, it's her state, yes, to the best interest of her state, but we are one country.
Right. You're not a governor, you're not a mayor, you're a senator. And so you are representing your state in these national issues that are going to affect the rest of the country. And I think that's also another thing that is so frustrating about a lot of, average Americans when they're watching politics are like, wait, you're making decisions that will affect tens and hundreds of millions of people. And based on these backroom deals that you're brokering, you're making decisions really in ways that feel really callous and in ways that feel really like, so is that what I'm worth? Like you had some conversation over lunch on some private patio. And as a result, whatever was promised to you was enough for you to strip us of things that we need. And we already have people dying because they're making choices of, do I have enough money for my insulin today? Or do I need to keep the lights on? Or do I need to keep my car running so that I can get to work so that I can maybe get insulin next week? You already have people who are saying, don't call the ambulance because I can't afford that bill. You have, people are already making these trade-offs, and you go into a room and decide that whatever you can get for your state is worth continuing to put people in even more vulnerable situations. Like, I get why you...
And also, you got to remember that this is all happening while writing a check to billionaires. So it's not just like we as a country are all making sacrifices, and unfortunately, some people are going to lose. This is saying that poor people are not worth a deep analysis on how we can actually ensure that they are on a pathway to success. We're saying we don't care. Well, Congress is saying we don't care. We're going to still write multi-million-dollar checks back to billionaires who are the richest they have ever been in all times, right? Like you have literally some of the most richest people living in the United States right now still getting kickbacks from the US government. And at some point, it's like you cannot say that you're for the working class while continuing to strip that same working class of any semblance of democracy or any semblance of healthcare, especially because there were so many nuggets within that bill that would have made it illegal for states to pursue holding tech companies accountable for AI. Like, that's a black box of all black boxes. So.
Preach. I mean, and speaking of billionaires, I think you also have this world where, as you said, the richest people on the planet are richer than ever. Many of them got it so rich in America. And it's like they're in this competition to see who can exploit the best, and they're taking out their egos. I know you've got a headline about one of the dumbest rich.
I mean,
trying to rebrand himself, right?
He's trying to rebrand himself, but I'm not here for it. I'm going to let him have his little feud with Trump, but let's be very clear. So let's talk about Elon Musk threatening war against the entire GOP. The Musk and Trump feud continues. Elon Musk is now threatening the GOP that if they pass the big, beautiful bill, that he would sabotage any possibility of their reelection by clearly bankrolling their opponent. And I think what's truly interesting is that, Elon Musk was one of the biggest proponents of shrinking the national budget, ensuring that we were reducing waste, fraud, and abuse. It seems like the vast majority of cuts that DOGE, which is the department that he oversaw, even if they want to pretend like it wasn't him, he oversaw, cut mostly programs related to vulnerable communities. And so it's interesting watching Elon Musk now trying to rebrand himself while kind of separating himself from the bromance that was developed between him and Trump, considering that the department that he created, DOGE, did many of the same type of cuts. But I guess adding $2 trillion to the national deficit isn't a good business decision for the country. It sure hell isn't a good business decision for corporations who the vast majority of them operate and live in the United States. So it's quite funny watching the feud. He's the enemy of my enemy is still my enemy, but also my co-conspirator.
But I'm like, okay, you take him down and I'll eat my popcorn and yell world star.
Yeah, but I'm not like cheering you on. I mean, I'm cheering you on, but not cheering you on.
He's also only waging this war because he got embarrassingly put out of this administration, which is like, if you didn't learn from the first administration, then I don't know what to tell you. Trump doesn't even have the same vice president. So I think if you thought you were going to be different, it's giving like the scorned ex-girlfriend who thought that like she could change the guy. Like, no, you can't change him. He's gonna do what he's gonna do, and you're going to fall victim to the same approaches that he brought to this other relationships. But if you were still in the administration, you would have been standing right behind him trying to explain why these cuts have been good. You'd have been benefiting from them because there would have been something written in there around EV that would have benefited you. But because you're on the outs, the tax cuts are not benefiting you. And so as a result, you want to reposition yourself as someone who is like for the working class, when it's like, number one, Tesla cars are like so unsafe and failing every test right now. Number two, you were there backing the whole white South African refugee. Like, come on, you are not about to convince me that you are here for the people.
Absolutely
but again,
not.
I'm watching this like reality TV. I want to see confessionals. I want to see pulling hair. I want to see everything.
Like, take off real hair. Take off the
toupee, spray off his orange spray tan. Like, I want to see it all.
I agree. Like, I'm not convinced with this new rebranding. I also think Elon Musk is starting to realize that the vast majority of people who bought his Tesla cars were liberals, were people who actually care about the environment, were people who are actually pushing for, more EVs. And I'm loving the fact that he's seeing the fruit of his trash labor come back to bite him. And also, this is happening while he is currently polluting a Black community. Like,
yep. Yeah. He's never beating the allegations. Like, he's
never beating the racist allegations.
Yeah.
Never. Absolutely not.
I'm wearing my Beyonce shirt, and I purposely did this because I'm going to be holding my good sis accountable. Speaking of boycott and backlash.
Could you not wait until after Virgo season, Beyonce? Like,
well, listen, and I'm going to see the concert, and I'm like, why would you do this to me right before I'm going to see the concert? Yeah. So to catch y'all up, Beyonce at, I believe, her Houston show was wearing a T-shirt. On the front, it said Buffalo Soldiers. On the back, it was kind of like a long paragraph about the the history of Buffalo Soldiers, but the language it uses was so racist and offensive towards Native American communities. It calls Native Americans enemies of the state, and a bunch of other language that is super, super offensive. For those who are unfamiliar, Buffalo Soldiers were Black men who often served in the Union Army and directly after the Civil War were enlisted to help wage war against Indigenous people as the government was taking their land. And so I hold a lot of nuance and care for those who were put in that position, those who joined the army to fight for their freedom and then were pushed to continue serving in the army with a side that liberated them. But in a war that was nowhere near as altruistic, nowhere near as liberating, and we're on the wrong side of history in that way. And that white America knew to put Black people on the front line and say, you go out there and fight Indigenous Americans, and let's have y'all two communities of color clash because we want to de-incentivize your solidarity. So I think there's a lot of nuance about Buffalo Soldiers, but the language used erases all of that nuance and just leans into the fact that they were doing some noble cause and were taking over these quote unquote savage, like it's just super offensive. And I think Beyonce, as someone who's reclaiming Black relationship to musical genres and reclaiming Black relationships to the South and the Midwest, needs to be a lot more responsible about how she did that. That like, just because we're reclaiming Wild Wild West energy does not mean that we are reclaiming the racist narratives used to steal Indigenous land. And we as Black people have to be in better solidarity and not co-opt white supremacist language, no matter how fun and cute and Western it feels. Like, it could have just been a Black man on a horse and call it a day. It could have just been a shirt about Black cowboys and call it a day. But that shirt itself, just like, burn it. Whoever was the stylist that put that on her, like, no, don't do that again.
And that's the thing too, right? It's a prime example that celebrities are not inherently the ones to have these kind of nuanced conversations, right? Yeah, there are ways that they can bring up topics within their music and help us to analyze it as a collective community, but to have the expectation that the celebrities are going to be able to give that perspective, I think sets us a lot of us up for failure. But more importantly, it sets them up for failure within their own camp. And that's why they have to be intentional in hiring the right people who can have those conversations, who can understand the nuance, who probably would have told her that maybe give a description about the Buffalo Soldiers, but maybe take out this language because that's incorrect or that's not a good representation. It's very easy for people to say, well, Native Americans or indigenous communities to the North America owned slaves, but we're talking about maybe 5 tribes out of hundreds of tribes, right? Hundreds of Native American tribes that did not own slaves.
And many more were actually abolitionists, not just what we're actively fighting with us and alongside us to end that practice because it goes against their spiritual and cultural beliefs of like, you don't own another person and you don't treat another person with so much cruelty and callousness because we are all interdependent and interrelated. So we have to honor those nuances and not lean into these flattened narratives.
Exactly. And it's like a recognition if we can understand the propaganda that the oppressor, right, the oppressive systems try to play against us right now. You think they weren't doing those same ploys back then? The lies we've been told about each other is intentional so that we do not collaborate, so that we do not come together, because the minority communities in this country are the majority, right? We are collectively more, also around the world, right? The minority, what we consider minority communities in the United States are a part of the global majority. And so I think we really have to take a step back and analyze the things that we think we know about the history of ourselves, recognizing that much of that history came from the very people who slaughtered us, who raped us, who put us in internment camps, who put us on plantations. Like, all of these things are a true representation of white America. And we cannot allow them to continue to run with the narrative that, Buffalo Soldiers in all its glory were the best of the best and did not perpetrate many of white supremacy narrative, but also that some Native Americans, not all, the vast majority, more than 90%, did not participate in the slave trade. And like unpacking that now before it's too late, and they use those same tactics again.
Preach, preach, preach.
But I do love Beyonce, but girl,
yeah,
you want to hire me? Because I would be like,
you enough to say you could have done better, and you are normally a lot more intentional, and so we know that you could have done better.
Yeah, you can do better. You can do better, and this is not the time to do what a typical Virgo would do, which is shut up, step back. We actually need you to lean in,
yes,
and just correct yourself, and it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Yeah. My last article is Trump.
Oh, Trump.
Oh, Trump. 16 Democratic AGs are now suing the Trump administration over $1 billion that were cut from school mental health grants. Let me say that again. The Trump administration cut more than $1 billion in school mental health grants that were going to students. So 16 states are suing the Trump administration they sued it on Monday, accusing the Department of Education of unlawfully terminating more than $1 billion in bipartisan federal funding for school-based mental health services. Mind you, this might be the only services that students receive to grapple with a wide range of issues that impacts their learning development. So you have states like California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Mexico, New York, Nevada, Oregon, Rhode Island, Washington, and Wisconsin. Where the hell is Pennsylvania? Pennsylvania, get it together. Get it together. They're suing the Trump administration, hopefully to roll back the termination of these grants, especially because these grants were earmarked by Congress, and it is actually illegal for the federal government to withhold money that was already earmarked by Congress in their annual budget. So I'm curious to see how this all plays out, but it's a prime example that the services that the Trump administration are cutting are some of the only services that are going to some of our most vulnerable communities, while they're continuing to try to pat the pockets of their corporate cronies.
Yeah, I'm so glad to see that these attorney generals and that these states are fighting back. Mm-hmm. Again, the checks and balances we desperately need. But I'm just like, man, they are just attacking our communities from all sides. And it's really frustrating to see and to know how many people are waiting with bated breath, like, okay, will I have the access that I desperately need, or will that all go away tomorrow? It's just, I hate it here. Long 6 months. Like, God damn, we are not even close to the end of his administration. The midterms cannot come soon enough, though. And I really, really hope that we can bring in even more folks who can, rise up against this.
Absolutely. With that being said, we're going to take a quick break. You're watching On the Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network.
Yes, season 2 of True Talks is here, and we are turning up even higher.
Yo, it's your man Torre, the newest co-host on the set, and I'm bringing heart, heat, and hard truth every night.
And we are keeping it all the way fire. Ain't no filters, ain't no fluff, just straight facts. Y'all know how we do.
So stop scrolling and pull up to our YouTube at Truth Talks-Live. Like, subscribe, and smash that bell.
And after you do that, join us, because we go live weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern on all the coasts. Wherever you are, from culture to controversy, we say what everyone else is scared to say.
We talk truth. Season 2 of Truth Talks. Let's go. Because this time, we ain't asking. We're taking the mic.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change. We are digging into boycotts, and particularly Target, who's catching it from all angles. Progressives and conservatives are boycotting the company for different reasons.
No, absolutely. This kicked off about a year and a half ago when Target made the decision to remove its LGBTQ affirming merchandise in stores based on the right-wing conservative protests and the backlash that they received online and in person. As a result, this continued into a wider pushback against DEI policies, where Target then found themselves buckling under the pressure of conservatives. And as a result, once they rolled back their DEI policies, you saw a number of Black activists and organizers come out and organize around a larger boycott that now has continued for more than a year and has been considered one of the most successful boycotts in American history since the bus boycotts.
Yeah. And it's important, we've talked on this episode a lot about the ways, not just this episode, but the show in large, about how DEI has become such a dog whistle language for anything related to Black people. So they say anti-woke, but they mean anti-Black, anti-queer, anti-everybody who's not them. And this boycott isn't just about shopping. It's about shaping culture and dictating whose identities are acceptable, especially when those people are consumers, are spending their money with you. And so people are asking themselves, do you deserve my dollar?
Yeah, no, especially when, ironically enough, all of this is happening by a company that is going back on the very community that created the enthusiasm, right? Target was promoted and elevated by Black, queer, Indigenous communities for the most part. Those are the people who regularly shop at Target, utilize the products. And so now to allow the conservative movement to almost call your policies, your practice, your company too woke in the face of all of this, and then you just fall in line. You just comply in advance. And I think it's funny, even more funny, because the vast majority of these people could not explain to you what DEI means or what woke is. They come in with a preconceived notion. And what they really just mean is anything related to Black, queer, or communities that they do not deem to be American enough. And well, what is America? What is America without us? What is America?
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is like, to the point of complying in advance with Target, they made a lot of money in a post 2020, post racial reckoning, post murder of George Floyd era on amplifying Black businesses and stocking their shelves with these products by Black people. I mean, I remember like during, when Juneteenth was made a federal holiday, Target had all kinds of Juneteenth plates and napkin cups and all this kind of stuff. So they made a lot of, listen, what a 4-year era, what a 4-year run. And so they made a lot of money off of using Blackness as a marketing tool. And the moment another administration comes into office, and let's be clear, like there are some entities that really had to shift because they were dependent on government aid, NPR, PBS, universities that depend on government funding. Target is a private corporation, did not need to follow any orders of any kind because they don't have to, and they have the money to go without any sort of tax breaks. So the fact that they were complying in advance was already offensive in that way. And so that's where, you got this boycott coming up. And then to put that in historical context, this idea of boycotting as protest, you mentioned it, Black people invented the lane. So for you to think that you were going to engage Black people and then toss us to the side, and then we weren't going to stand up and fight back like you thought. Absolutely not. From the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955, which you mentioned, sparked by Rosa Parks and sustained for over a year, which led to desegregation, to also the anti-apartheid boycotts that HBCUs led and that Black student unions at universities across the country led in the 80s. We've been showing the world how to hit injustice where it hurts the wallet. And to think that we wouldn't leverage our buying power in this way was short-sighted, but also, you clearly underestimated and didn't do enough landscape analysis or whatever this case may be to understand what community you were about to piss off.
Absolutely. And we're at a time where actually boycotting is in many ways is easier than ever, especially for most communities, because there's so many other options that you can take advantage of without being forced to shop at a particular place. In fact, if we think back to Operation Bread Basket, funded by Reverend Jesse Jackson, under Dr. Martin Luther King, they used, through his leadership, they used economic boycotts to demand jobs, business contracts for the Black community. And it worked. In many years, they secured more than 8,000 jobs and more than $15 million in wages, which would not have come had we not used the tactic of boycotting to push back against traditional institutions that want to shut us out.
Yeah, so it absolutely works. And we absolutely need to lean into it. And that's why conservatives are trying to flip that script and weaponize those same tactics to push corporations away from inclusion, to say, well, I'm not going to shop at a place that is forcing this woke agenda on me. Those same folks who will call protests un-American when Black Lives Matter leading the way, are happy to lead coordinated attacks on companies like Disney and Bud Light and Target when they don't like inclusion. So now you have these companies who are under the pressure from both sides and have to ask, where will I find myself caving? Ultimately, whose pressure means more to me? And I think it's requiring brands to develop a brand identity and say, regardless, I shouldn't wait for my Black consumers to boycott to know that it's non-negotiable for me to strip Black businesses from my shelves and to treat this marketing strategy as a trend, that this is here to stay. And if you don't, then you are showing us that we are not your target audience anymore.
Yeah, it reminds me of, a lot of companies are now trying to make it appear as if they're apolitical, right? They're not really in the mix. They're not a part of the discourse. But to be apolitical is to say that, and to some extent, that you would rather not offend one community by not engaging another. You are actually still choosing a side. And let's be clear, this is not just about merchandise, right? It's about erasure. The attacks of Target are a part of a larger backlash against any acknowledgement of the systematic harm that have been faced by communities of color, have been faced by communities related to gender, sexual orientation, or class. And companies, they're folding. Target is just in a long line of companies that have taken our items, taken moments of celebration for us off the shelf, and have sent a message to the larger American community that we don't matter. And if we don't matter, then our dollars don't matter, as far as I'm concerned. I haven't shopped at Target in probably a year. And I've saved so much money, I have to say. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm good.
This is working out in my favor. Yeah.
I get to pivot on other things.
That I had to pivot, like my son's milk, we used to get at Target. And like, I will find another place that sells this very specific form of milk. Like, you're not the only company who sells it. And I think that's another important thing. While they're telling us that their bottom line matters more, is more important to them than our belonging, we are proving that my consumerism is not more important than my value. And so it's so important that as DEI has been treating like a branding exercise instead of a core value, we build pressure and we prove, like, what am I actually committed to? What matters most to me? I think that the average Black consumer has truly been sitting on business in this way. I even seen TikToks of Black women who will sit outside of a Target and be like, you're not supposed to be in there.
I've seen those videos.
Get out. Like, you're not supposed to be in there. Come out.
They've been so good. So good.
That's why it makes me so frustrated when we who have actual, like, have to actually pivot and go out of our way to change our shopping patterns, are making these decisions, and bigger Black institutions are not. We had a Baptist association take $300,000 from Target recently.
I don't even think of it, maybe, and which is funny because it means they're a cheap date.
Right.
Like, that's what you're caving for.
Getting 7 figures, like what? And then Essence Fest is still being sponsored by Target. And listen, the claim that gets used is, I was locked into that partnership. It was before the boycott began, and blah, 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 blah. But what we have learned from the legacy of boycotting in the past is that it is going to require risk. Boycott is not convenient. It's not convenient for the company. It's not convenient for us. You think in the Montgomery bus boycott, that was easy for them? People were walking to and from work in Montgomery, Alabama heat. They had to carpool with people they were not driving with before for months and months and months. Okay. Like, it was not a convenient thing. And so it frustrates me when companies act like, oh, their hands were tied, or individual influencers act like their hands are tied. Because let me tell you, the guest that we are bringing on is someone who really proved, like, you do not have to just fall in line with this. He was putting out a book. And if you know anything about putting out a book, it just goes on to random retailers and you don't have a lot of control, or so you think. And he made it his business to say, I don't want this book stocked by Target. And so I just feel like it's people with way more resources and money and access who are acting as if there was nothing they could do. And then you see organizers and authors and creatives proving that there's always a choice. And you just decided that you were going to feign helplessness instead of do it. So I just can't wait to bring him up and talk more about it. But I know that, that the boycott is working in spite of, and there's a business case for the fact that boycott works.
No, absolutely. This is not just boycott. I mean, diversity, equity, and inclusion, being more conscious, being more conservative to environmental impacts, being more community-oriented companies actually impact your bottom line. It's actually a good business decision. It's not just a cutesy thing. And let's just talk the numbers. According to McKinsey, companies with greater diversity outperforms their peers by 36% in profitability. And yet nearly 1 in 4 Fortune 500 companies have cut or eliminated their DEI department in the last 18 months, which tells me that despite the implications of what this will have to their bottom line, many companies are still walking back the commitments that they made. And these were commitments that some of these companies made long before George Floyd. So did you really care, or was it about the optics of it all? Did you actually want to make real change in your company? And we're talking about household brands. We're talking about brands that some of us have devices in our pockets right now. And we need to be more vigilant on the companies we support when they don't support us.
Preach. Yeah. Because who suffers most when it happens? Us, Black workers, LGBTQ staff, disabled folks, women of color, people who are already underrepresented, underprotected, and taken advantage of. And so that's why we can't let these moments go unchecked. Again, like you said earlier, it's not about merchandise, it's about erasure. So we gotta do what we gotta do to prove that if we don't matter to you, then we'll show you don't matter to us. So anyway, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking to the brilliant Fred Joseph, who can speak deeply to how community is the antidote to these moments and how boycott really does work.
Absolutely.
On the other side of change.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Joining us now is a friend, a mentor, like someone I truly look up to and learn so much from, and teaches us all about community. Fred Joseph is a cultural critic and advocate who's been writing about the politics of backlash and what this wave of anti-DEI really means. He's a 3-time New York Times bestseller and USA Today bestseller, whose debut YA novel, This Thing of Ours, which is incredible and you all should read, became an instant bestseller even after he refused to sell the book in Target stores. Love to see that. Joseph's other books include a poetry collection called We Alive, Beloved, 2 books of nonfiction, Patriarchy Blues and The Black Friend, a collaboration, Better Than We Found It, a children's book, The Courage to Dream, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. I mean, we're not talking to no lightweight over here, okay? Fred Joseph's writing and philanthropic work also go hand in hand, which is what I love most about him. Mm-hmm. He's been recognized for his community work by Forbes 30 Under 30, the Comic-Con Humanitarian of the Year Award, and the Route 100 list of most influential African Americans, among many other accolades. Welcome to the other side of change, friend.
Welcome.
Glad to be here. What's going on?
We really appreciate you joining us. We know you have a busy schedule, but I think as someone who has, walked alongside you at many protests in New York, we were deeply interested in having this discussion with you because of your long history, but also your unwavering commitment to Black folks, right? Your unwavering commitment to the truth and telling those stories both online and in your books to ensure that there's the record, right? The American record about what is actually happening and how Black folks are coping. And so I wanted to, jump right in and discuss, this boycott that is happening with Target, but also across a number of different companies where Black folks are actually taking back their dollar to ensure that we're not supporting companies that don't have our best interests at heart. What do you think about this current movement, the longevity of it, the economic implications of it? Is this about economic protest or also about cultural control?
Oh, man. Well, first, before I begin, I just want to shout out Nina Turner real quick. Who
Absolutely.
One of the absolute leaders of this movement and sort of been a North Star for me in various instances, and I think so many other people in our spaces. But, the Target boycott, which is now, as you all said earlier, the most successful boycott by the Black community in over 50 years. Many said that it was going to be pointless to do. Is something that is not only necessary in this moment, but I think that something that is reaffirming in this moment, right? It seems oftentimes like, for many we're powerless, right? With the sort of descent upon us of artificial intelligence and, the new bill that's been passed by, Donald Trump's administration, further heightening the powers of ICE and, the bill, so on and so forth. But this protest demonstrated just how much power we actually do have, right? Just how much autonomy we have in terms of not only where we spend our money, but where we find ourselves at the crossroads of our humanity. And so, it meant a lot to me to take part in it because, quite frankly, I hadn't seen enough authors doing so. Actually, I don't see enough authors speaking up on things in general. So, why I did, if you all want to hear about that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that I don't see enough authors. As an author, I don't see enough authors talking about it. And also, I think that because publishing can be so mysterious and you don't realize how much power you do or don't have, and it can vary based on publishing house. What I loved is that you showed me something that I didn't know was possible. That oh my gosh, my book had come out before this boycott, but when I have a future book, I can say I don't want it sold there. I have that power, and I think that's what these sorts of moments do. These boycotts allow us to see you aren't as reliant on them as you think. You aren't as dictated by them as you think. And so I think that's so important that you modeled it and that we each continue to find ways okay, listen, even if whether it's as a consumer or as someone who has an opportunity for something to be on that shelf, to say no, to say I actually want it sold anywhere but Target is a really powerful stance to take. So I really love that. And again, we've talked earlier about DEI being treated like a trend instead of a necessity. And so for those of us who are also writing about and writing to audiences that care about this, it's so important that it's not just something I write in the pages so that I can get $30 per hardcover, but that I really say no, I really mean this. I really mean this. And as a result, I'm not going to allow this this product that talks about DEI to be sold in a company that doesn't value DEI. And so I love that you were sharing that as someone who is creating a product and how consumers can also lean into it. But what do companies need to understand about real equity work, especially in the face of this coordinated opposition? Like, how can corporate workers or those in C-suites shift their processes to better align with this equity work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they can shift their processes by actually doing something, right? The reality of it is, just to start out sort of with like the publishing industry, is change takes imagination, right? I didn't know that I could boycott Target and have my books not in Target. I just got a list of, as you said, and those are normally the places where your book is. But I said to myself, if my book isn't in certain stores, right? Because my books are not always in every single store. There's a list of stores that they are, and we try to get them in others. Then that must mean that I can pull my book from stores too, right? And again, it's that imagination that I've seen, just looking at history, right? That every single sort of intersection of battles that we've waged or fought in this country has required us to imagine how we can show up to that battle, how we can be on the front lines, what weapons and tools and shields do we have? And so I just had to ask the question, right? Sometimes it's as simple as asking a question. And I think that to the question that you asked, C-suite and sort of what corporate individuals can do at these institutions, get back to the imagination that you had in 2020, because it's really funny, right? There was one instance where people said, McDonald's never shuts down. And it was during the height of the pandemic. McDonald's has shut down, and people were like, "Oh my God, McDonald's actually shut down. They never shut down for anything, and this must be really." To make a decision at any point, right? If something actually matters. And so, that imagination, that ability to demonstrate sort of like the ability of these institutions to do things they've never done. We've seen it before. We saw it again during the pandemic. We saw how creative everyone was during the pandemic in terms of making money. We saw how creative everyone was during the height of the sort of 2020 quote unquote awakening, if you would, after the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, in trying to tap into Black and brown communities. So what I ask for people to do is continue having that sort of same wherewithal in this moment, right? Especially because, to my understanding, as the sort of broad big tent left, as they call it, said, Donald Trump's election was going to be an existential crisis and the end of democracy. And it certainly doesn't feel that way, right? Not from the way that people are showing up and the way that DC is showing up. If it truly is that important, right? If it truly does matter that much, wouldn't you show up in the same ways that you did in the last awakening or reckoning that we had, right? Wouldn't it mean something to actually tap into the marginalized communities that are bearing the full brunt of this fascist nation? But we're not seeing that. We're seeing a collective of entities and a collective of individuals who are not only bending the knee, but actually handing Donald Trump the sword oftentimes.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm happy you brought that up, like imagination. We've talked about it a few times on this show. Is it feels like people forgot what it means to dream and think outside the box. Like, we've been told so often what we can and cannot do, that so many people can't even imagine that there could be a different play of events. Yeah. And we're seeing that even with our politicians, as you alluded to, right? Like, if Donald Trump is truly the Antichrist that everyone has been alluding to, and that he's going to bring about the downfall of American democracy, why are we still operating under the same rules and guidelines that we've always operated? They are burning the rule book while we are still expecting them to consider our needs and concerns, which reminds me of why Boycott is so important, right? It is a moment for all of us to make sacrifices for the better good of everyone. You made sacrifices you didn't know that your book was still going to be on the New York Best Time Seller, but it was enough for you to stand on your principle, stand on your legacy, stand on like your values that enabled for you to say that regardless of the outcome of how successful my book is, I don't want it sold in a place that doesn't appreciate me and appreciate the people that look like me. So with that being said, like, what is the role of consumers? How can we show up differently to continue the resistance? I know a lot of people feel fatigued. I don't feel fatigued. I drive past Target all the time and I never am tempted to go in. So what are the ways in which consumers can show up better, especially when people like you are making the sacrifices that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, we constantly talk about this being a capitalist nation, right? It's on a capitalist nation, the most important thing is the almighty dollar, right? Thing that most people pray to at their altars in their personal life and in their career life. And so it's important, intentional about where your dollars are going, right? Why would you take your hard-earned money in this nation and give it to an entity that does not care about you, right? I tell people all the time. And then the reality of it is, you know, for me, quite frankly, historically, Target accounts for about 40% of my sales because they are a massive retailer, right? And so the idea, right, and I've seen some sort of said by other people who have books and whatnot, that it's impossible to make bestseller lists if you're not in Target, which is just absolutely not true, which I just demonstrated. Right. But at the end of the day, it took intentionality, about where do you take those dollars, right? Take them to indie bookstores, take them to Barnes and Noble, who still is working with, robust DEI practices. Take them to, all these other entities that have books supporting us. And that's the thing that I'm asking people to do outside of books, right? It's not just about, or even my own products or even my own work. Where is your money going? Where is your time going? Right? Because bandwidth is limited, right? Bandwidth is limited as it pertains to all sorts of resources, time, finances, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have to be thoughtful about how you extend said resources, extend said bandwidth, because if you sort of just float through this thing, without a care, these entities and institutions are going to take advantage of that, right? Target is hoping that you don't care. I mean, even with, you mentioned all Essence Fest earlier, that's one of the I was actually supposed to be at Essence Fest. It's one of the reasons I dropped out of Essence Fest, because I can't claim something publicly and then decide, oh yeah, well, I'm going to still be at Essence Fest with a giant Target logo behind me. You know what I mean? And so, even though that's going to harm me once again, because Essence Fest is this massive festival of potential readers, at the end of the day, I have to stand on something, especially because I write for young people, and I have to demonstrate the things that I claim to stand for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's not just about the words you say, but the actions you do behind closed doors when no one's watching.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you just hit so many points. You literally just answered my next question, because cultural leaders like in Essence have to actually lead. I think we're in a moment where everyone wants to be an influencer, but forgetting that title means you have to be someone who influences. You don't follow a trend and say, well, I'm gonna just do what it is that, like, you have to be willing to say something before it is popular, not wait for the cover of there's a lot of people who believe this already. You have to stand, and there is a lot of people who believe in this boycott already. So I think people would have loved to see an Essence Fest say, you know what, we just pulled out of this partnership with Target, and that is going to cost us, but we know that our community has our backs, and watch the community show up for you, right? So I won't even, go there, because I think you already spoke to that of just like what we need in this moment. But I will just ask you, how can our listeners support your work and this larger push to let their actions match those projected values?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the question. I think at the end of the day, like I said, kind of frankly, Target does historically account for almost half my sales. Yeah. So, find a bookstore to support and get my latest novel. It's been starred, reviewed. It's become a bestseller. It's already been nominated for a few awards. So, particular places that I love, Uncle Bobby's in Philly, Baldwin & Co. in New Orleans, Mahogany Books in DC, Lit Bar in the Bronx. There's so many other avenues to support, not only the people who you enjoy as writers and in other capacities, but to make sure that you're also supporting your community, right? the way that finances work, it's cyclical, right? You put money into the Black community, that money comes back within the Black community, right? Like I know that going to Uncle Bobby's in Philadelphia and buying a book inherently supports Germantown, right? I know that it supports Philly. I know these things. And so when I'm going to a Target, historically, I don't know that Target supports anything in that community. There's plenty of Targets in Philadelphia, and not a singular Target is doing the things in the community that Uncle Bobby's is doing, right? So it's not just about the product. It's not just about tearing down, or dismantling the institutions like Target. It's also about building up our cultural institutions like the Uncle Bobby's, right? Like, again, it goes back to bandwidth and resources. At the end of the day, you're allocating something to build something as opposed to allocating something that goes into a black hole of white capitalism.
Yeah. It's the redistribution of wealth in the right way, right? Yes. Taking from those who continue to take from our communities and reinvest it into the spaces and places that make our communities whole. We appreciate you so much, Fred, for coming on today. We definitely have to have you back. It's been an honor as always. You continue to drop the gems. And where can folks find you online?
If ever you see my stuff on Instagram, if I'm not being overly suppressed like everybody else.
Exactly right.
I'm at Fred T. Joseph, but I primarily use my Substack these days to put out, free long form essays and cultural, critiques on what's going on. So my Substack is In Retrospect. But yeah, I'm there, and find me in your local bookstore that is not Target.
Yes. This Thing of Ours is the name of his YA novel. This Thing of Ours. It is so good. And what I love about YA is, like, you don't have to do that. Oh, I'm gonna buy it for my nephew. No, buy it for you. Read it yourself, because it is I found it so resonant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. My next joint drops in 26, titled Everything's Not Lost. And it is my first novel specifically centering a Black teenage girl. So
nice. We appreciate it. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. And yeah, find him offline. Go get his book, Where Books Are Sold in Your Community, from Black-owned bookstores. So with that being said, you're watching On the Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it.
Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
Welcome back to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. If there's nothing else you took from this episode, let it be known that protest is power, but only if we build together and not just tear it down. There's work to be done.
Yeah, so much work to be done. And Black Americans taught this country how to protest with purpose. Now, as that same tactic is trying to be weaponized against us and to push us backward, we just have to double down on truth, justice, and unapologetic resistance.
Absolutely. Support businesses that stands with our communities, demand DEI to be more than just a slide in a presentation, and never let fear dictate how you show up for yourself and for your communities. Yeah. We belong.
We belong. I love that affirmation. You've been watching The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network. Until next time, keep pushing.